at the Weingarten Center at the University of Pennsylvania, and I'd like to welcome you all to the 20th Annual Weingarten Center Disability Symposium with this year's theme, Reflecting Upon the Past, Planning for the Future. Closed captioning is available at the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. The Weingarten Center wanted to continue its tradition of offering the Disability Symposium in spite of the unpredictability of COVID. Our wish is that next April, the symposium will take place in person in Houston Hall here on the Penn campus. The Weingarten Center falls under the Division of University Life, and the center encompasses academic support, tutoring services, and disability services. The center works with students in all 12 schools, and we encourage you to check out our website to discover more about our services and staff. Complete details of the symposium presentations and speaker biographies are available on the Weingarten Center website. Today's presentation is Leadership in Academic Resource and Accessibility Spaces, Navigating Turnover, Burnout, and a Hybrid Work Model. Our presenters are Swimm and Kimberly Doan from Tufts University. The presenters will accept your questions at the end of the presentation, but please feel free to put any questions that you have into the Q&A throughout the presentation. Thank you again for being here, and let's get into today's presentation. I'm going to turn it over now to our presenters.
Perfect, great. Thank you so much, Caitlin. We're so excited to be here with you today. Welcome to our presentation. My name is Kimberly Doan, and I'm here with my colleague, Swimm. And we're so glad we could be here virtually since the conference isn't happening in person. So thank you so much to UPenn and the Weingarten Center for hosting us, and thank you so much to Caitlin and Chanel who are moderating our session today. And I think we're all set for the next slide. Perfect. So a quick overview of the agenda before we get started. After introductions, we'll provide an overview of our accessibility and academic resource spaces, as well as our institution. So today we'll share our experiences around supporting our staff, aiming to combat burnout and facing the increased administrative demands that we've seen throughout the pandemic. This will include how we evaluated the programs and processes that we were using over the past 3 to 4 semesters and probably beyond, as well as our actions moving forward as a result. So this session will conclude with some time for Q&A, and our moderators will monitor the chat throughout the session. So though we're in a virtual setting, we'd love to have this be as interactive as possible. And if folks are able to kind of add questions to the Q&A, we'd love to tackle those at the end when we have a little bit of time and build our management toolkits together. Before we begin, I'd like to provide a land acknowledgement as an expression of gratitude and appreciation for the land we currently reside on. We acknowledge that the land we live, learn, and thrive on are traditional, ancestral, and unceded homelands of Indigenous and tribal nations. In Medford, our home and institution are on the original homelands of the Massachusetts tribal nation. So we acknowledge the genocide and systems of oppression that have dispossessed Indigenous people of their lands, and we honor the people still connected to this land today. A little bit more about Katie and I. Again, Kimberly Doan, I use she series pronouns. There is an image on screen of my very scruffy terrier named Riggins. He makes an appearance on campus from time to time. I have a master's in child study and human development, and my undergrad work was in psychology. I focus on the accessibility side of the house. We'll talk a little bit about our center as a whole in a few minutes. And I've been with Tufts since 2012. And I'm going to pass along to Katie to do introductions for herself.
Thanks so much, Kim, and good afternoon, everyone. I want to echo Kim's thanks in welcoming us here today to the Weingarten Center in UPenn. My name is Katie Swimm. I use the she series pronouns. I've also been at Tufts since 2012 when I started my graduate work here in theater and performance studies. But I've since moved on to develop the academic coaching and subject tutoring programs here at Tufts. And I've included on screen an image of my big gray and white Maine Coon cat, Calvin, who does not come to campus, but poses for great pictures. And I'm thrilled to be with all of you today. We can go to the next slide.
Perfect. I think Riggins and Calvin actually weigh the same amount. They're the same size. Perfect. So first, we're going to set the scene a little bit and talk a little bit about our organization and our center so that you have some more context about our situation. So displayed on screen is an image of an aerial shot of part of our Medford campus in autumn. It's a very beautiful campus. It includes large brick residential and academic buildings. And you picture it as our quad space. So Tufts is a medium-sized private institution in Medford, Massachusetts. We're just outside of Boston, about 15-20 minutes away. We also have students in downtown Boston at our School of the Museum of Fine Arts campus. And on these campuses, we provide support to over 6,000 undergraduate students, as well as our graduate students in arts, sciences, and engineering. We also support our Fletcher School, which is a graduate student population. Tufts also has medical, dental, and veterinary schools. Those are through that institution specifically. Our Star Center team is comprised of 13 team members. There's a visual kind of pie chart on the screen, which notes different areas of support that Katie and I are going to go into a little bit more in depth, including academic coaching, subject tutoring, central administration, accessibility, writing, and workshops and education. So our team is comprised of 4 FTE in accessibility. We have 6 FTE in the academic resource spaces, our Associate Dean, Kirsten Beeling, and 2 central administrative team members. One of these roles, our coordinator, was recently posted, so we're excited to engage in the hiring process for this role. 9 of the positions are 12-month and the remaining are 10-month. So there are a lot of different folks doing different things in our office, and we work really cross collaboratively as well. We also have student staff who support the office, and some of these roles include subject tutors, writing consultants, writing fellows, which are connected to specific courses. We have academic mentors that work with Katie's team, our office assistants that provide administrative support, and our note takers that are part of our note-taking program. So we have well over 100 student staff that keep us running every day and are an amazing source of support for us. Slide.
On the academic resource side of the house, we offer academic coaching in various formats and modalities. So our coaching program includes a focus on executive functioning skills like time management, test taking and study strategies, reading and note taking, work-life balance. We do this work as a workshop series for both undergraduates and graduates, and then during one-on-one sessions. And we work in one-on-one sessions with both grads and undergrads as well. We have a robust writing skills program that includes one-on-one consultations and workshops with writers in any phase for any project. This might include work on something from a first-year course, first-year English, through their senior honors thesis. For our graduate students, this could be assistance with master's theses or doctoral dissertations. We also offer support for multilingual writers. And then lastly, our peer subject tutoring program offers one-on-one and group tutoring in the natural sciences, math, economics, computer science, engineering, and foreign languages. And we provide support for statistic-based courses as well. Next slide, please.
Many of you all do to ensure that they have equitable access to their Tufts experience. We focus primarily in 4 main areas, the first being academics. There are over 500 courses at Tufts in the catalog for arts, sciences, engineering, and Fletcher. And we also have cross-listed courses. So if a course is also cross-listed with one of ours and is at a different institution like our nutrition school, then we'll provide support to those students as well. We also provide residential accommodations. Our students have a residency requirement during their first and sophomore years, and so they may request housing accommodations. We currently have about 150 for the current year, so that also is a high level of support we provide in that area. In the area of transportation, we don't have golf carts, which are not very friendly to the New England campus. So we're currently on year 2 of a pilot program where we're partnering with Lyft. And finally, since we are in close proximity to the city, parking is limited, so we may work with students on access to parking on campus. Next slide. So as we move forward, an important note that would be helpful to share is that as we were navigating the pandemic, we were also navigating a department merge. So we combined our Academic Resource Center and our Accessibility Services spaces into what is now the Student Accessibility and Academic Resource Center, or the STAR Center. This provided a holistic link for students working with our office, and it really streamlined the referral process for advisors, deans, and our campus partners. It also destigmatized some students who noted, oh, well, I don't know if I necessarily have a disability. I just want to connect with someone on support, but they maybe didn't feel comfortable going to accessibility services. And now they can come in and just talk about resources in general and all the different areas that Katie and I are connected to. So there were a number of stressors that presented throughout this time with the merge. This also changed some of our management structure, our reporting lines, and some individual roles of employees. There was also financial impact connected to COVID, which many of us experienced around budgetary reductions, hiring freezes, merit freezes, promotion freezes. So that was challenging as well. Our merge took place in summer of 2020, so this was just 2 months after we transitioned to remote work. So the team was in lockdown with this big merge feat to tackle, and in addition to supporting the individual needs of our team, it was a challenging time to also provide that individual support. So we very much saw this highlighted need transitioning from supporting this day-to-day crisis management and triage connected to the pandemic to really stepping back and thinking about what long-term solutions we could put in place for what we were experiencing, especially once we realized that this wasn't resolving in a month or 2 or a semester. Next slide. So on screen, there's an image of a number of individuals. It's an illustration, what looks like to be a Zoom window or a WebEx window or a Skype window. And along with the changes that we were seeing in the office, there was also a shifting landscape in higher ed and workplace culture in general. There was this new precedent for hybrid and remote work expectations. And previous to this time, we were operating completely in person. So this was a new experience for us to navigate. A new survey was released by the Pew Research Center that notes that 60% of workers with jobs that could be done from home say they like to continue working from home all or most of the time when the pandemic concludes. So we really needed to think about what employees were looking for with their team and their workspace and how we could provide that support to retain our team members. So a survey completed by Talent Accelerated, I believe this was this past January, February, it was comprised of over 2,000 knowledge workers and 500 HR directors, not specific to higher ed, but more broadly. And they found that 88% of knowledge workers say that when searching for a new position, they're looking for one that provides flexibility with hours and location. So employees are also re-examining about what productivity means, how it's measured, as well as seeking out diverse teams. So those 3 components were primary findings. I think it's important to note too, like since this is not higher education specific, it's more broadly. I think there's a different context for our industry, but I think it's also important to note that this greater flexibility in these other spaces could also draw candidates out of our teams or our industry. Next slide. And a couple other areas of note, which many of you are familiar with. The first being that the broader workforce is navigating this time period that's been dubbed the Great Resignation. I feel like I'm hearing about it everywhere. This has showed an increase in turnover of roles, and we've definitely seen that not only at our institution, but within departments. The next is to consider generational considerations. So currently, over a third of the workforce are in the millennial and Gen Z generation, and over the course of the next decade, this will increase to approximately 58%. So as the workforce is changing, we also need to consider how are we providing management, learning opportunities, and the ways we're approaching the different ways that teams are shifting and individuals. This also demonstrates an increased need for a growth environment at our institutions and on our teams. So by this, I mean considering how we're providing professional development, opportunities for networking, and the ways that our teams can be personally fulfilled in their professional endeavors. It seems more important now than ever, and when embedding a learning culture within a team, I was listening to a podcast that noted, the important considerations are people consistently challenging each other for growth? What is the tolerance for taking risks for growth, and who's modeling that on your teams? So, and finally, another consideration, especially over these last 2 years, are changes within resources of the department, which will undoubtedly continue as the pandemic does as well. So now I'm going to pass it on to Katie to talk a little bit more about how we address this and next steps.
Thanks, Kim. So next slide. As we entered the 2020-2021 academic year under this new normal, considering all of the points that Kim just made, it became clear we really needed to assess the needs of our team. Next slide, please. So we developed a department climate survey as something of a standardized method of assessment for the group. And the questions in the survey assessed our preferred work modalities and schedules, workplace culture and morale, how was all of that going and feeling, and then office processes, familiarity with resources, and the like. These surveys shifted in intention, scope, style, and frequency to meet the changing needs of the team. So we've done these more than once. The one we're really gonna talk about and share with you today is the first one that we did. And these also gave our team an opportunity for anonymous feedback, in addition to lots of individual one-on-ones and team meetings. So I'm going to talk you through the questions that we used and the results we saw when we first did this survey, and these are what inspired us to make changes to our leadership processes and our support in the office. So we would love to know as well, if at any point you want to put in the Q&A whether or not you're using any sort of climate survey or another kind of staff assessment tool, that would be great and welcome to share. And the other thing that I'll note before we move forward is that there's going to be a resource kit shared with the group along with the slides and the recording. And one of the templates we've provided for you is of this climate survey. Next slide, please. So on the screen now, you can see a bar graph of the first question that we asked. So this assessment was given in the summer of 2020 before kind of our return to work began. I think it's here that it's important to note, and what you're seeing on the bar graph is that nearly everyone in the office felt at least neutral when it came to returning to work in some capacity. So we asked folks, given the current progress around pandemic responses, the vaccine rollout, safety measures, continued distancing, and mask use, how comfortable do you feel returning to work for August of 2020? And on the screen is a bar graph that represents the results of this survey. So we learned that 50% of the office felt very comfortable, 25% felt relatively comfortable, 16.67%, about 2 people, felt neutral, and then 1% on our staff felt very uncomfortable returning. Next slide, please. So the next question we asked all staff was whether or not they were interested in exploring a hybrid work model. There were 2 individuals in our office that covered our front desk, which is a high traffic in-person area. And so their roles would need to be almost entirely in person, but the rest of the staff was interested in a hybrid work model. And so the bar graph on the screen represents the results of that question, with folks indicating, by a large majority that everyone desired to explore that option. Next slide. We asked the staff about their levels of burnout. We know burnout has and continues to be something that's impacting everyone during this ongoing pandemic. So we asked staff to agree or disagree with the following statement: I am able to fulfill my role while maintaining a healthy work-life balance. 4 members of our staff strongly agreed, 7 somewhat agreed, and 1 somewhat disagreed with that statement. And in a second question, on a scale of 1 to 10, our office rated their level of burnout at a 6.3 on average. And while this doesn't seem or didn't seem off the charts, it was nevertheless a level that we hadn't seen before. So it was an area of concern for us. And our experience was not unique. So many of you may have seen the article that was in the Chronicle of Higher Ed in October 2020 that talked about the new pressures of being part of a staff during the pandemic. The article was titled, "The Staff Are Not Okay." And there was a particularly relevant quote that I'd like to share. So the article said, quote, "The staff are the middle management of higher education. Those in power make decisions, set policy, and devise plans, and we are the people tasked with implementation and execution. We are the face that faculty members see when they have questions, concerns, or struggles with the technology they have been asked to use. We are the face that students see when they have questions, concerns, or struggles related to distance learning or on-campus policies and procedures. We are the face that parents see when they reach out to us, these days often in distress." End quote. And so this really sums up the experience of our office, and I suspect resonates with many of you as well. Next slide, please. So we asked the staff an open-ended question to describe their ideal fall 2021 or fall 2020 hybrid work week format. And folks noted improvements in work-life balance and productivity when working from home. And so their ideal work environment included a range of remote options. Folks wanted to work between 1 day to a full 5-day remote week. That was all of those things were on the table. Folks reflected that certain aspects of their roles worked well remotely, but some did not translate to an online environment. No one really wanted to travel to the office to just be on Zoom. There. And everyone kind of noted improvements with work-life balance and productivity being at home in some respects. So we also asked what would be beneficial as we prepared to return to work on campus. So what did staff need? Folks noted an adjusted workday schedule to avoid traffic. Boston traffic is notoriously bad, as it may be where you are joining us from. So folks wanted to avoid that with an earlier schedule coming in later, 10 to 6 kind of thing. Everyone needed upgraded technology, both at home and at work. Everyone was hoping for clear game plans and expectations, which certainly was tricky at various points throughout the pandemic as we all sort of experienced a lot of unknowns. There was an expression of a desire for a slow ramp up to returning to full-time in person. So not going straight from no days in the office to all days in the office, but building that up over time. And folks really wanted to develop existing programs and not take on major new initiatives as we sort of adapted to being back in the space. Next slide. So the takeaways from the survey were pretty clear. The majority of our office felt comfortable returning to work, but there was a strong desire for hybrid work. There was a reticence to take on too much. And all of us seemed to know that this new academic year would present unique challenges, and it sure did. And so we didn't want to say yes to a lot of new projects ahead of knowing what this new normal would look like. And everyone was reflecting on a high level of burnout. So it's important to note that these are responses and requests and reflections that we never would have seen prior to the pandemic and this shift to remote learning. So it was a big flag that we were seeing this new landscape in the areas of management in particular. So how do we respond to these requests and new expectations? Next slide. So now, flash forward to our current moment and to the strategies we've been working to incorporate after hearing our staff's concerns in that first climate survey. Next slide. We determined that we would have a minimal in-office presence during the 2020-2021 academic year. The university did not issue a standardized return to work plan. It was left to the needs of the individual departments. So with that, half of our staff, those who felt comfortable being in the office and who had the expertise required to manage some of the in-house tasks that needed to be done, rotated in pairs during the fall of 2020. So 2 folks would come in for about 2 weeks, and then another 2 folks would come in for 2 weeks, and we'd sort of rotate in that way. And then in spring 2021, we realized that we didn't even really need that much of a presence. So much had shifted online that we didn't need to be here as much as we thought. And so at that point, one person would kind of rotate in. And all during this time, occasionally other people would pop in as needed. Our student employees, however, all of our tutors and writing consultants and graduate office assistants conducted all of their work remotely. And we also minimally expanded programs that year. So it was really about kind of maintenance, but a big heavy lift in terms of meeting the needs of the current moment. So now I'm going to pass it over to Kim to talk about some of the administrative support strategies that we developed during that time. So next slide, please.
Perfect. Thanks, Katie. I'll add to your last point as well that, I think we have a really incredible team, and I think that made thinking about like return and coverage in office feel, I don't know if the word easy is right, but I think there was a real team effort to come in and provide support to each other, even in some of the roles that were more student-facing in person. The rotation even too, we had a lot of volunteers for support, so that's something that we were really grateful for. To talk a little bit about this area, one of the primary areas we were focusing on was considering how we could alleviate the stressors of this increased workload with administrative tools and software. So we wanted to try to build in processes that allowed for this hybrid or remote collaboration between folks that were at home and those that were at the office, and think about how we could do this in a way that's more automated and minimizing email correspondence and Zoom meeting time. That's something that I think we still are connecting on, whether it's the length of Zoom meetings or the frequency, as well as thinking about 10 back and forth emails, where how can we resolve that and minimize that with a tool. So the first thing that was supported was establishing remote workspaces. So this was something that we really intentionally emphasized early on, and we talked about conversations on minimizing distractions. How could we establish designated spaces that we could engage from? And I think what was actually more challenging was then disengage from when we were home. And making sure that folks had the resources they needed at home to continue productivity, but still be accessible to our team, other campus partners, and to students. We also really leaned into collaborative document sharing. This was something that we had access to before, but I think really took off once we were in this hybrid space where minimizing the back and forth of emailing of documents and spreadsheets, so that everyone could kind of be working on it together and have the primary version, minimized a lot of administrative work. So we currently use Box, but some other tools are Google Docs or Microsoft OneDrive. If anyone has a different collaborative document sharing that they find to be accessible and easy to use, enter it into the Q&A and we can share that with each other. I'd love for us to be able to share some of these tools too. Another focus area is that we looked at project management and task management. I think when we were also all together, it was a little bit easier for us to pop into an office, connect on a project, get a status update, where it was a little bit trickier when that had to be a Zoom call or that had to be a phone call or a meeting. So we essentially had a homegrown or a Tufts built software called Tufts Projects that was for project management, but we also explored a web-based software called Trello. We're currently searching for an accessible project management software, so if folks have a project management software or a task management tool that they're using, enter that into the Q&A to share. This was really helpful not only for our central administrative team, but also was really beneficial in our student management. So our office assistant team really used that for project assignment, project tracking, and it minimized a lot of the back and forth that we initially needed to kind of get updates and see where things stood. So if you have a software, tech, or tool in any of these areas, add it in. I'd love to hear feedback too if you've used these tools or ones that folks are using that maybe we didn't cover. And finally, on the next slide, we also shifted how we approached meeting scheduling. So our office administrator, AJ Lyman, who's amazing, took on exploring scheduling tools. So some of the ones that were researched were Acuity, Visita. We use Accommodate as our database management system, and we looked into the scheduling tool for that. And we found Schedule Once to be the most accessible. So on the screen, there is an image of my Schedule Once website. There's a photo of my face, my name, a little note noting to schedule, and then you'll see 3 different event types where I have a 30-minute advising option, I have a 50-minute accessibility option, and then I have a 30-minute faculty and staff option. So now, instead of the back and forth on getting availability, our students are often in more classes than are the minimum, so their schedules are extremely busy, and scheduling is usually involving a lot of back and forth. And less students are calling for appointments, more of them are emailing. So this really streamlined that process where now AJ could just send my link out, the students have access to my schedule, it syncs up with our email and calendar system, which is Outlook, and then they're able to see which options are available. We still do scheduling over email and phone if students prefer it, but I've also heard a lot of great feedback from students that they may also say to, rather than, do you have availability to meet, they'll say, can I have the scheduling link again? I want to find time to connect. So this has really drastically reduced the back and forth that we've had around scheduling, which is great. Our central administrative team piloted the launch of this. And since we had so much impact early on, we expanded it to the team, and now almost our full team uses it. It's web-based, and I believe there's a free version that might have some limited functionality, but we pay $10 a month per user, so, and not the entire team uses it. So we also found that this was more cost efficient than some of the other options that were available too. And there's a lot of parameters that we can put on the system as well. So if my schedule ends at 6, I can block that off and have students not schedule after that or before a certain time. We could also set it up so if it's a 24-hour window, so students aren't setting it up for tomorrow morning, and then you have an intake that doesn't have time to prepare for example. So there's a lot of really great components that we've found helpful. Next slide. So next, we wanted to think about the trends around turnover that we were seeing and think about how we could support our teams more deeply. So first, we were considering how we were navigating hiring and onboarding. Once the hiring process resumed for us, we wanted to minimize the time needed to continue developing these resources with every candidate pool. So by streamlining interview guides, interview questions, hiring process checklists, onboarding training, we were able to reduce the time needed for this, but then we were still able to customize it to each individual in each role. Katie's training may be very different from what my training looks like. So we are adjusting those processes too as we go. We also developed, primarily on the central administrative side, a comprehensive coverage plan. When we were understaffed, this would provide more support for the individuals that were then providing coverage. And by operating with more of a generalist model, folks were able to provide support in a number of different areas rather than everyone having this one specialty area and then us not being able to provide that support if that person was out for a sick day or on vacation or there was a role transition. So really thinking about that with our central administrative team that does a lot of that student-facing support. If there are exams scheduled, the exams students are coming in for exams regardless of our staffing. So we wanted to make sure we had great coverage in that area. And finally, we needed to rethink what flexibility looked like. I know Katie went over that with our survey. So thinking about kind of what were the needs of our office and coverage, as well as what our students and colleagues needed. So teams and leadership are under extraordinary demand. So we really needed to consider this traditional schedule of a business hour model and how this varied by role and job components. We also had students that were either taking remote classes, maybe they were in Singapore under a completely different time zone. So really thinking about how we could be accessible to students really expanded too from this typical 9-to-5 model that we were currently operating. Next slide, and Katie's gonna take it from here.
Great, thanks, Kim. So along with the administrative aspects of supporting the team, we aim to be very intentional about the support we provided each individual and the team overall in terms of personal and professional growth. And so these next few slides include some specific strategies we use to meet this goal, and our efforts enhanced focus on managing meetings and correspondence. We really wanted to dig in there. Individual and team check-ins, and then increased opportunities for reflection and self-evaluation as individuals and the larger group. Next slide. So on screen now is a cartoon. This is a Some E-Cards, one of my favorites, with two gentlemen kind of in period clothing, looking pretty harried, sitting at a very messy desk with papers strewn all around them, and it says, "I've survived another meeting that should have been an email." Some of you may have seen this before. We conducted several discussions at both of our full staff retreats and in one-on-one meetings to kind of determine what requires a meeting anymore, what requires sitting down in one space or being on a Zoom together, what could be solved or updated via email, or what would be appropriate to send via our office chat system. So we use a telephone and chat system called Jabber, which has proved to be really helpful for quick questions, check-ins, and the like. So individuals shared their preferences for communication, and we're very transparent about it. We talked about trying to use delay send features on email to be respectful of folks out of office time, using status flags in our office chat. So the way that this chat works is with a green, yellow, or a red status, and you can kind of customize those to say where you are or what your availability is like, so that folks would know whether or not we were available to chat. We talked about how a closed door in the office meant that we weren't around. And we tried to hold a firm and collective line around not responding to students, in particular outside of business hours. And really trying to when the STAR office was closed, we would get back to you in the next business day. It's important to note that at this point, all of our meetings now happen in a hybrid format. So this allows for last-minute adjustments with minimal administrative demand connected to that. So if someone does need to be out of the office, they can join remotely. Our schedules can adapt as they need to. And that way, our team could have a consistent in and out of office schedule, and we can be fluid in that way. So all of these efforts were intended to provide a set start time and stop time to our workday across the staff. I can share that this wasn't perfect. Certainly not. We all had moments of working outside of business hours when situations demanded it. Some of us had a harder time than others following our own advice. I'm just raising my hand about that. The upside of these conversations, however, was that it did develop an openness and a transparency around expectations. We know that now there seems to be this always online mode that some of us have found ourselves in this new normal, with Zoom constantly and moving from just meeting to meeting to meeting, facilitating that. So starting to have some of these transparent conversations with your staff is a recommended strategy to encourage this kind of boundary setting and communication, especially when it comes to this kind of always online mode. Next slide. Another strategy we adopted was having a strong structure around team and individual meetings and check-ins. So to both manage the administrative needs of our office and to provide space to check in on folks' individual need, levels of burnout, we kind of created this strong internal meeting structure. So these meetings are intentional, more or less immovable on our calendars. They really stay put. and allow us to keep our finger on the pulse of what's happening. So my team has individual check-ins with me once a month, where I focus on 3 questions. How are you, how is the team, and how is the work? And that's from Brene Brown's Dare to Lead. I found those to be really useful guiding questions for those conversations. And then my team has a weekly team meeting where we focus on more logistics, what's happening with that week, problematic or puzzling student cases, sharing strategies there, logistics, upcoming projects. Sometimes we use the whole hour for these things, sometimes we don't, but it is an immovable part of the week. Kim, do you want to talk a little bit about the central admin meetings?
Yeah, so mine is structured pretty similarly. We meet every other week, and then we have our individual meetings weekly, so that there is a point that either the team or individually we can connect each week. Since our role components are really connected to the day-to-day, we're also connecting much more frequently every day on topics that are coming up, whether that's through Jabber and our instant messaging or via email too. So, but a very similar structure to Katie's team.
Great. And then Kim and I both check in with our boss weekly with Kirsten, the Dean of the Star Center. So we have that time set aside to escalate any issues that come up on our side, or just check in about our plans with our teams for the week. And this structure provides a really strong pathway of communication between senior leadership, middle management, and staff, which has been really productive. Next slides. So another idea we implemented in 2021 was a mid-year check-in. Ideally, we would complete this in January before the start of the spring semester, but each manager adapted the timing based on the needs of their team. So for example, my team completed them in early December so that their feedback could be incorporated during a team retreat in mid-December that focused on spring planning. And that is one of the tools that we'll share today as a template for the mid-year check-in. And ours has 3 specific goals. So first, it asks each person to reflect on how their performance planning goals are progressing at this point in the year. Tufts uses a SMART goals-based performance planning system for professional development and growth. And so we include a reflection on those goals, which are set each May with each manager, and that's part of the template. And then we ask each individual to reflect on their successes. Where do you feel like you excel? And challenges. Where do you feel there's room for growth? And then the third goal with these check-ins is to determine what support each individual needs in order to do their best work. So these have provided space for some really great and transparent conversations about job responsibilities, areas of burnout, areas of growing interest, challenges. They've been really fruitful, and I think is a really nice way to kind of take the temperature of how folks are doing outside of a performance review process. Next slide, please. So our full staff retreat happens 3 times a year. So we do this in January, May, and August, and they're usually between 1 or 2 days. And these allow us to reflect on past semesters and plan for the future. They're time we appreciate to intentionally gather and think about how we work together, what our goals are as a unit. We spend time reflecting on past semesters. So with that, we do a tremendous amount of data gathering during the year, and it's always really informative to see how other members of the group are reaching students, how many students they're reaching, where the pain points are, where the successes are. And it always leads to a really fruitful discussion and brings up a lot of areas for future collaboration or growth. And then we spend time talking about the future. So one activity we always we do is a summer project plan. So we have it's kind of this robust summer activity that we get introduced in May and then report back on in August. And this allows folks to develop or expand an idea, program, area of professional development. That's also a space where folks can do more work around our DEIJ initiatives, which happen also throughout the year, other professional development opportunities, and anything else that needs development that aligns with our mission. And these retreats are also a really good time for building. We think about how we work together as a team. So we've done activities like a SWOT analysis. In case you're not familiar, this stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And that kind of work allows us to really think about how we can grow as a team and where we need to develop more resources or spend more time. And then finally, one of the more enjoyable aspects of the retreat is trying to align it with some sort of social event. This has, of course, been difficult during the pandemic, but in the past, we've done escape rooms in Bodeborg. We did a virtual escape room. We've gone out for appetizers. But having that time to really just connect as humans has been beneficial. So overall, it's a space to get to know each other and one another's roles in a distraction-free environment. And so in our resource kit, we've provided a sample retreat agenda and some activity prompts for you that highlight the examples that I just listed. So we hope this can be a helpful tool if it's something you would like to implement in your own departments. And next slide, and I'm going to pass it back to Kim.
Great, thanks, Katie. So to piggyback off what Katie was just mentioning with social experiences, we wanted to focus more significantly on the growth culture and fostering learning opportunities and boosting morale were both priorities. So in an effort to support team building, here are just a few activities. Katie mentioned some of them. Some of them we got pretty creative with, like a virtual escape room when we were back on campus, and prior to being on campus too. Even we had like a kickball and time in the sun on the quad just to kind of get out of this space for 20 minutes and separate from our administrative spaces. Kirsten right now is doing a grab and go breakfast, and I feel like we saw more people in this one event to grab and go with a bagel than we have since we went remote in spring of 2020. So that was really amazing to see. We've done sculpting. We also make an effort to support birthdays, which seems like such a little thing, but a couple door decorations and then being able to celebrate that person if they're in office on their birthday is a nice thing to do. I've also done sentiments of appreciation or recognition with the team, where before we have a retreat, I'll do a 2 to 3 question survey on Qualtrics and just note, recognize a team member, or can you talk about a time where you collaborated with someone on the team and note something about your work with them. And it's just so nice, especially at either getting ready for a busy semester or at the conclusion of a really busy year, to just have that hard work recognized by your colleagues, as well as kind of thinking about feedback we're getting from students too. And I think a lot of the things that come up in those kind notes are things that folks don't even think about in the moment either. Next slide. And next, again, focusing on the learning culture I had mentioned. So I started a virtual Lunch and Learn series with the central administrative team last year. So topics ranged from communication strategies for complex customer support to efforts in supporting first generation students. So we selected a wide range of topics, and then each month we had kind of an informal discussion where we had a resource, and then we had a conversation about that podcast or that documentary about that article. And it was just a nice way to kind of change up the day-to-day triage. It was more Zoom time, but we tried to do it at lunch and have coffee or lunch during it. And we expanded that this year, and I really look forward to it. I think we opened it up to the entire team so folks could sign up, and it isn't even necessarily maybe an area of expertise, but just a topic that folks think we should be talking about. And it's been a really nice way to also have more voices heard in our when we're all together, where in staff meetings we're talking about a lot of logistics really quickly. So to speak to my team, and I know Katie's is doing this as well, we're also consistently seeking out individual opportunities for learning, such as this conference, thinking about academic courses, LinkedIn Learning. That's just acquired Udemy for Business. So on-demand learning, I think as that has expanded and virtual classes have expanded, that also has been a really great opportunity to encourage folks to follow upskilling in those areas that are really interesting to them. When we have time, winter break, summer break, those are usually the best times for that, as well as kind of thinking about what's accessible within the department budget. And the final area for consideration, Katie just touched on this briefly, is thinking about how we are supporting our management team. I think we spend so much time thinking about those we are managing. Thinking about providing support to our fellow managers is really important, and we needed to really set aside intentional space to do that. So we formed a management group within our team, but I know Katie and I are also connected to a management group at the institution, and that's also really important too, to have that colleague feedback and thinking about how folks are doing things within your own structure and how we're navigating these spaces together. I think opportunities like this and having individual conversations one-on-one with folks in other academic resource or disability spaces are really important as well, to think about how we're kind of tackling what's happening right now. So we really strive to build trust through transparency and build a supportive network where managers could turn to each other for support. And I think this also was really helpful in reflecting inward and thinking about our own approaches to leadership and being vulnerable on where those areas for improvement were. Next slide. Okay, so as we get closer to the conclusion here, we wanted to provide resources to some of the tools we discussed today, as well as some supplemental readings. So one of the resources provided is a resource list. Some of them are the articles, which included the data I shared. Katie, do you want to give an overview on the remaining pieces in the kit?
Sure, thanks, Kim. So we've also included a template for the climate survey, as I mentioned, that lists some of the questions that we used, a template for the mid-year check-in, and a template for the retreat with some activity guides and prompts in it as well. And we invite you to use these, make them your own. We really welcome you to take them on and make them work for your department, your team. Kim and I have provided our contact information at the end, and we're always happy to jump in and chat with someone if you wanted to speak more about these tools or what we've talked about today. Can we go to the next slide? And that brings us to the end of what we wanted to share with everyone today. Just wanting to thank, again, UPenn and the Weingarten Center for letting us share all of our information with all of you, and we have time for Q&A. So do we have any questions that we can answer, folks?
We do, Katie. So I have a couple that I can respond to pretty quickly. So someone had asked what scheduling tool that was. So it's called Schedule Once, and it's one word. That's the name of the product. The vendor is Once Hub. And I'll add that into the chat too, so that you have the spelling of that. The slides will be available, so we'll provide those as well if they are not posted. Thank you to those who shared collaborative document sharing, Microsoft Teams, Office 365. I always forget the additional capabilities in Office in addition to email. And on what I was just connecting about our morale/PD events during work hours, and are they mandatory? So I think kind of two parts to that. So sometimes they are during work hours. So, you know, for example, this virtual series that I mentioned, we do it on the last Friday of the month. It's 45 minutes. It isn't mandatory, but most of our team goes, and I think it's a really nice opportunity for us to connect in an informal way, but it's not mandatory, for example. And then for other PD events, I think that it oftentimes is something that's discussed with the manager. So if it is driven by the person who's seeking out the learning opportunities, I think it doesn't, you know, necessarily, you know, fall into like the mandatory, like an assigned resource. But okay, if we want to think a little bit about time management, is there a LinkedIn Learning course where we can think about some strategies? And then, you know, the team member is kind of seeking that out and then sharing that back with the group. So I think there is flexibility with it, but we weave it into a lot of our conversations so that it's kind of just part of our learning culture. Those were the first few that I saw in there and wanted to address right off the bat.
Thanks, Kim.
Yes, we have a couple more in here. So an anonymous attendee asked, is executive function coaching available to students who do not have accommodations at Tufts?
Great question. Yes, it is available to any student who wants or is interested in that support. So we have 3 professional coaches who are on our staff who provide that kind of support for students, but we also have a bunch of graduate students as well who post open availability throughout the week. And so students can log on to a appointment portal that our office supports that allows them to make an appointment with a coach to talk through those skills and how they might want to develop them. So yeah, it's open to the entire undergraduate and graduate population.
Awesome. And the last question I see is, why is writing support separate from academic coaching?
That's a great question. So Kim mentioned in the very beginning of our presentation that we merged the Academic Resource Center and the STAR Center together, or the academic resource side and the accessibility side together to form STAR. So our writing program is actually directed by one of our dear colleagues, Christina Akins. And prior to this merge, writing and subject tutoring, and then it used to be called time management and study strategies, were kind of 3 almost siloed programs. And so with this merge, academic coaching and subject tutoring kind of came under my development, and writing has remained kind of in its own bucket. However, what I can tell you is that having everybody in the same office space, Christine and I are working constantly and referring folks back and forth for support. So if a student comes in for academic coaching, they certainly can talk about a paper that they're working on with a coach and how to plan that paper writing, how to stay motivated to write the paper, how to, start it more than the night before it's due, ideally, that kind of work. But if the student is having trouble with something like argumentation or content or style, we will refer that student over to the writing program and set them up directly with a writing consultant as well. So that's one of the benefits to having the programs set up as they are, is that it's a one-stop shop for students, and we can really easily refer them to really the experts that can help them with each particular area.
Fantastic. I just want to give a big thank you to Tufts Katie Swimm and Kimberly Doan for this rich discussion today. As we mentioned, the slides and a recording of the session, along with the resources that they've mentioned, will be available in a few days on the Weingarten Center website. And we hope to see you for our next session, The Future of Leadership in Disability Services, next week. So thank you all so much for joining us. Big thank you to Katie and Kimberly as well.
Thanks, everyone.